Let's look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah! What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. The Detroit Lions are approaching the NFL trade deadline. On October 31st, the NFL trade deadline will end, and teams will no longer be able to improve their roster or improve their draft capital after that date. And with the Detroit Lions going into a Week 9 bye after their Monday Night Football game this week, they have an opportunity to make a large trade after Monday Night Football, as well as have about 2 weeks to get that player acclimated to the offensive or defensive side of the ball before returning to play in Week 11 versus the Los Angeles Chargers. And a lot of Lions fans think that the Detroit Lions should be buyers. Obviously, last year they were sellers, shipping off TJ Hockenson for a second and a third round pick respectively. But this year they're in a very different position. Whereas last year they were 1-6, this year they are 5-2, with the potential after Monday night to be 6-2 on the season. And with a talent boost, could very well become one of the more talented rosters in the NFL and potentially push for not only a division title, not only a conference title, but realistically a Super Bowl title with the proper trade and proper value. So today, with the help of some other Detroit Lions fans and other people within the Detroit Lions community, I put together 4 mock trade scenarios for the Detroit Lions, addressing the defensive side of the ball, addressing the pass rush or the secondary, or any other need this Detroit Lions team could potentially have, and putting together some approximated values for what it would take to acquire these players. So today, we're going to take a look at 4 potential mock trade scenarios for the Detroit Lions to make after Monday Night Football versus the Las Vegas Raiders to potentially give them the talent boost they need to secure the NFC North, compete for the NFC Conference, and potentially compete for a Super Bowl. So with that being said, let's start off with this first trade here. Now, I do not have the Detroit Lions trading for both Chase Young and Montez Sweat and Kendall Fuller, but one of the 2 pass rushers. Either Chase Young or Montez Sweat combined with Kendall Fuller would cost the Detroit Lions roughly a 3rd and a 5th round pick. Now, personally, I would lean toward Montez Sweat, as this year he is having a really good season. Already through 7 games, having 5.5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, and a pass defended. He is really young. He is going to be going into his 2nd contract, I believe, after this year, so you will need to pay him, but the Lions have enough capital to do so. They have enough cap space to pay Montez Sweat what he is worth, and he would bring a true edge rusher to the Detroit Lions. That would bring you with Aiden Hutchinson as probably your premier edge rusher, Montez Sweat with being your 2nd edge rusher, but realistically at this point in the season being your most productive pass rusher on the team, with Josh Pascal rotating in, with of course James Houston rotating in as a pass rusher when he gets back. And that is a pretty good young 4 rotational guys, with Aiden Hutchinson and Montez Sweat taking the most of those pass rushing reps, but with Josh Pascal being disruptive in his 2 games he played this season, and of course James Houston being that rotational pass rusher and great edge rusher that he's been over the last 9 to 10 games for the Detroit Lions, that is a really good young rotation that leaves Aiden Hutchinson with 3 years left on his deal, with Montez Sweat likely getting a 3 to 4 year deal after the Detroit Lions trade for him, Josh Pascal having this year and 2 years after that remaining on his contract, and then you have obviously James Houston, who does have 1 year left, but then becomes an exclusive rights free agent, which means the Detroit Lions can retain him for 2 more years after that. That leaves your pass rush with 4 young players, all of whom are under contract for at least 2 more seasons, and that gives you a pretty good rotation and a actually really strong, solid, and deep pass rush for your edge, is of course including John Kaminsky into that, and for the rest of the year, you have Charles Harris, Romeo Quara, and so forth that might also be moved at the deadline, but that gives you a really good young pass rush rotation for the Detroit Lions. Now, Kendall Fuller is a 28-year-old defensive back, not an old defensive back, mind you, but certainly not a player that is likely going to be around for a long time. I think this is more of a patch, a player that is going to replace Emmanuel Mosley for the time that he is on IR. Unfortunately, of course, tearing his ACL versus the Carolina Panthers. Kendall Fuller on the season has 6 passes defended and 2 interceptions already, but has 109 NFL games of experience under his belt. It is a player that very much has been around the NFL, knows how to play in the NFL, and might not start for the Detroit Lions, probably is going to be coming as that cornerback 3, but would provide excellent depth for the Detroit Lions while being kind of an added benefit of trading for a second alpha pass rusher. Now, another player from the Commanders that I think the Lions could be interested in is Jonathan Allen, the defensive tackle, as well as Kendall Fuller. I think this is another potential trade option for the Washington Commanders if they want to keep their edge rushers and move on from a player that is maybe a little bit older and maybe not quite as in the future plans. And this would leave the Detroit Lions with 2 players at 28. I believe Jonathan Allen is 28 years old, as is Kendall Fuller. Jonathan Allen this year has 3 sacks already from the defensive tackle position, 6 tackles for loss, 7 quarterback hits, and a pass defended. Putting him next to Aleem McNeil, I think, would give you some really good pass rush from the interior, would give you a penetrator, would give you a disruptive player in the center of that Detroit Lions defensive line next to Aleem McNeil, a young player who has already shown to be pretty disruptive in his own right. That would give the Detroit Lions a really good duo of interior defensive linemen and still give the Detroit Lions a decent amount of pass rush, with Josh Pascal officially returning to the roster last week. Him and Aiden Hutchinson, I think, are good enough to hold down that pass rushing front, even if it wouldn't be quite as good as if we had Montez Sweat or Chase Young. I think Jonathan Allen could add just as much impact to this defensive line, take a little pressure off Aiden Hutchinson, be kind of that second-tier pass rusher, and allow Josh Pascal to develop on the edge a little bit more and see more one-on-one looks as opposed to what he's seeing right now. And of course, we talked about Kendall Fuller's impact. Likely would be that cornerback 3, but would provide very quality depth in case that Jerry Jacobs goes down, in case Cam Sutton misses a game or 2. That would provide a technically really good cornerback 3 that realistically on a lot of teams would be cornerback 2, or even some players on cornerback 1. So taking a look at the Washington Commanders, I think there's a lot of different combinations that they can have, right? You have Chase Young, who's on the trade block potentially. You have Montez Sweat. You have Jonathan Allen, who is very clearly frustrated with the team so far. And Kendall Fuller, a young, or a not so much older corner as much as a veteran cornerback that could come in, learn the system pretty quickly, and just play really solid coverage in the absence of one of our top 2 starting cornerbacks. But there are a couple other trade options to take a look at, a couple other secondary members do keep in mind, as I think that is the biggest need for the Detroit Lions right now. Next player I want to talk about is Dante Jackson for the Carolina Panthers. A Carolina Panthers team that is 0-6. A Carolina Panthers team that needs draft picks to build around Bryce Young, and a team that really doesn't need Dante Jackson. Dante Jackson has had a really good career for the Carolina Panthers so far. Of course, is a freak athlete, runs in the 4.3s, which is something the Detroit Lions very much value in their defensive backs and skill positions, but he's had a very good career so far, right? 69 games for the Carolina Panthers, 14 interceptions, 1 pick 6, 2 forced fumbles, 259 tackles, and only 27 years old. He is on his second contract, but this year really isn't having the greatest year for the Carolina Panthers. Doesn't have an interception, doesn't even have a pass defended through the first 6 games for the Carolina Panthers this year. He's out there. He's playing about 85% of defensive snaps for Carolina, but really isn't being targeted, really isn't having the production he's had in the past, but is also not necessarily being avoided. He's given up over 255 yards through 6 games this year for the Carolina Panthers, which isn't bad, but it also isn't necessarily a lockdown cornerback. Being a player that's already 27, isn't having the most productive years of his career, and playing for an 0-7 Panthers team that's already potentially looking to trade out a couple guys for some extra draft capital, it makes sense for the Detroit Lions to make a call for a freakish athlete at cornerback, a guy that could slide in at cornerback 3, potentially as cornerback 2 if injuries arise, a guy that has starting experience in Dante Jackson for realistically not a whole lot more than a 5th round selection. If Kevin Byard can go for a player that is not quite as good as him, as well as a 5th and 6th round pick, a 5th round pick straight up for the 27-year-old Dante Jackson makes a lot of sense for both the Carolina Panthers and the Detroit Lions. And then the last couple of guys I want to take a look at are from the Tennessee Titans, a team that just traded away their former all-pro safety for a 5th, 6th, and backup caliber safety, is a team that could potentially be looking to move on from a couple other young secondary members, those being Sean Murphy-Bunting or Christian Fulton. Now, I've talked about Christian Fulton in the past, but just a quick recap. Christian Fulton on the year has been pretty good for the Tennessee Titans, having 3 passes defended, not having an interception yet, but also having a tackle for loss, showing he can be impactful in the run game, while Sean Murphy-Bunting has 4 passes defended this year, 1 interception, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. Both players are relatively young, and both players are relatively productive for the Tennessee Titans, but for a team that is very clearly in rebuilding mode, a team that just gave away a significantly better secondary member for just a 5th, 6th, and a relatively good safety, but I wouldn't say necessarily a great safety in Terrell Edmonds. getting these guys for an extra 5th-round pick on top of that doesn't seem that crazy, right? Sean Murphy-Bunting is a free agent they signed this year, but there are also potentially or rumored to be looking to trade away DeAndre Hopkins, who is also a free agent acquisition, so that's not off the table. And Christian Fulton is relatively young. In his 4th year, I believe, out of LSU right now, has been a pretty good cornerback, a pretty good young guy. Both of them have relatively good NFL experience. Both of them have good size. Both of them tackle really well, and both of them could fill in and give a significant upgrade over Will Harris on the boundary should something happen or should injuries continue for Jerry Jacobs or Cam Sutton. Both of them could slide in pretty easily, again, getting about 2 weeks after that Monday Night Football game to kind of get acclimated to the defense and get assorted with this secondary. But these are all players that I think would be talented for the Detroit Lions to go get. These are all players that I think could be impactful for the Detroit Lions without sacrificing a significant amount of draft capital or draft assets. So with that being said, those are my trade targets for the Detroit Lions at the deadline. I don't think anything's going to happen today. I don't think anything's going to happen over the weekend. I think if something is going to happen, if a trade is going to take place, I do think it is going to be on Monday night. I do think it is going to be on Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, after that Monday Night Football game. Take one more chance to really evaluate your roster if you're the Detroit Lions and make the most informed move that you can. Take as much time as you need to get the right trade set up and pull the trigger on Tuesday morning. But with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. I think the Detroit Lions could be active in this trade deadline. From what we've heard from rumors, it seems like the Detroit Lions have been making calls. They're trying to be aggressive at the trade deadline, likely upgrading the defensive talent, but we will have to wait and see. But with all that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below what trades you think the Detroit Lions should make. Would you be happy with giving up a 3rd and a 5th-round pick for a guy that is maybe an upgraded pass rush and an upgraded secondary? Would you be willing to give up a 5th-round pick for an upgrade just in the secondary? Or do you want the Detroit Lions to go bigger, give up multiple 1st-round picks for a guy like Max Crosby or Pat Surtain or something like that, make a bigger splash trade? I'm very curious to hear what you guys have to say. But with all that being said, that is all I have for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.